around Ken with female orangutans. Ken isn't exactly the best influence on the ladies, but it wasn't Ken this time. One day before the zoo opening time, Jane and Kumang had found a 5-foot long handled squeegee that a cleaner had accidentally left in the enclosure, and inspired by Ken, the two somehow used it to climb up the wall and hop out. Jane apparently wandered into an employee-only lounge area, finished off some of their sodas, and was found roaming around near the flamingos, where she had to be tranquilized and returned to her enclosure. And thankfully, Kumang willingly returned. But while she was the tamer ape this time around, it seems that Kumang wanted her own chapter in the adventure book. She managed to escape 2 additional times by shortening the electric fence wires with a twig. The first time, she was found sat playing in a garden bed where she was tranquilized. Then the second time, she was sat outside the monkey enclosure, and when approached by staff, she climbed on top of the bird sanctuary where she was tranquilized again. In fact, Kumang's mischief actually got the group put in solitary confinement once more, whilst the keepers made the wiring system more complex, upgraded the doors, and went around with an electromagnet to make sure there was nothing they could use to aid an escape. So even though Ken was in retirement, he was still seemingly costing the zoo money through his students. At this point, the zoo had reportedly spent a whopping $45,000 on security over the course of the escapes. As for Ken himself, as years passed, it seems that the escapes at San Diego Zoo really had finally come to an end this time. Ken was living a simpler life in his enclosure, sat relaxing, eating, and flipping off children that walked by. Ken settled down for years to come. He had finally decided to behave himself and stayed put in his enclosure. He had truly given up on his old ways. Well, in the winter of 2000, the zookeepers noticed that Ken was acting out of the ordinary. He was moving erratically and seemed uncomfortable, so the staff sent him in for a visit with the zoo doctor. Ken was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. Now, at first, doctors weren't too worried, as Ken was still young and fit and would most likely be able to fight off the disease. Well, sadly, as time went on, Ken's condition deteriorated, and the cancer had become more aggressive. The cancer that was now terminal. So the zookeepers decided that rather than letting Ken suffer at the age of 29, on December 1st, 2000, Ken Allen was euthanized.
Options for chemotherapy were explored, but at this time, the therapy was mainly geared towards making Kenny as comfortable as possible.